What is up, everybody? Shwayze here, and today we're discussing whether Stellantis, the maker of Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram products, is going bankrupt. Alright, so over the last several weeks and months, I've been seeing a lot of articles and videos online discussing the troubles that Stellantis is facing. And to be completely honest with you, they are facing a lot of issues. And it almost seems like it continues to get worse for them. Most recently, it was announced that they are having to pay a $190.7 million fine for all of their carbon emissions and lack of compliance back from like 2020 and 2021. And they still potentially owe another $460 million for lack of compliance for carbon emissions here in the near future. They also just announced recently that they're recalling 24,000 Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrids, which I actually just recently reviewed on my channel, because of potential battery failures. So it just seems like things are continuously getting worse for them. And this is on top of all of the other recent troubles that have happened over the last 6 months or so. One of those is the fact that they've had a lot of top executives leave the company. The head of Jeep North America, I believe, left. Dodge CEO Tim Kuniskis, he was also retired, but who knows if he was fired or left or on his own terms. We don't really know all the details, but there's been a lot of long tenured FCA executives that have most recently resigned or retired or were fired from the company. That's kind of led a lot of people to become more concerned, because that's usually an early indicator of some sort of troubles within the company. On top of that, if you look at the 2023 reporting, the company has consistently been losing market share year over year. So in 2021, they held 11.5% market share here in North America. In 2022, it was down to 10.9%. And as of 2023, they were at 9.6%. So that's quite a big drop over the years. However, 9.6% is still a significant number in the United States, but it is declining. Also, back in May, a bunch of dealers gathered together and sent a letter to the CEO of Stellantis asking them to make some changes in terms of the vehicle lineup. They were stating that the average price of Stellantis products is above the competition, and for that reason, their inventory just isn't selling, especially in this high interest rate environment that we sit in. They were also saying that certain trim levels that were in higher demand for some reason weren't being sent to the dealerships, so they organized this big effort to request stuff from the CEO, and that didn't really go anywhere. I mean, they all met up in June and they had a conversation, and the CEO kind of admitted that they were maybe doing things a little bit wrong, but not enough time has passed to really be able to see the changes from that letter that was sent in May. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to all the concerns with Stellantis had to do with the sales figures that came out in the beginning of July. In those figures, it showed the sales figures from January of 2023 to June of 2023 as compared to the sales figures from January 2024 to June of 2024. And I have the figures in front of me right now, and every single model within those brands is down year over year, except for the Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer, also the Fiat 500 and the Dodge Hornet and Alfa Romeo Tonale, because they were brand new models last year just rolling out, and now they've had a little bit more time under the belt. Now, the reason the Fiat 500 jumped year over year and showed improvement is because they just recently released the 500e. So they actually sold one Fiat 500 back in 2023, and they sold 204 in 2024. However, 3 of those, we're talking the Tonale, the Dart, and the 500, are not accounting for a large portion of their sales. I mean, combining all of those, I think they sold less than 13,000 vehicles in the year-to-date period, so the 6 months ending June 30th, 2024. And year over year, which is January to June 2023 versus January to June 2024, their sales are down 16%. If you take Q1 2024 versus Q2 24, they are down 21%. So a lot of people in the media, when they saw this information, kind of freaked out. There were so many media outlets and so many videos out there talking about Stellantis and how they're potentially facing bankruptcy and they're just dying. They've got nothing left. And I even saw an article where it almost referenced Chrysler from 2008, 2009, and kind of tried to draw a parallel between Stellantis now and Chrysler back then. And that's what I wanted to discuss in today's video, because the numbers do show a story, but I think the media is exaggerating a little bit the entire condition that Stellantis is in today, because it is a completely different picture than what it was back in 2009. Okay, for this part of the video, we're going to hit the road and talk a little bit about a history lesson here of what happened with Chrysler back in 2008, 2009. At the time in 2008, they were owned by a private equity group. And if you guys aren't familiar with private equity groups, they typically load up companies with quite a bit of debt. And so if you guys don't know what happened in 2008, 2009, there was a big financial crisis where people were strapped on cash. Everything was kind of falling apart, including the stock market. People were losing their jobs. And so when you combine a company that has a lot of debt with people who really, the last thing they're thinking about is buying cars, you have a very tough situation when it comes to a company continuing to operate. So the company had to file for bankruptcy. They had to go under, and then they came back and they went public in 2009. And the latest information I could find was from 2009 figures, which is when the company actually filed for bankruptcy. Shortly afterward, they came back, and through that restructuring process, they merged with Fiat and they became FCA. Now, I wanted to do a comparison with Stellantis today versus Chrysler back in 2009. So I pulled up the financial reporting as of the latest reporting period, which for Stellantis was year-end 2023, and I compared it with year-end 2009. And I want to draw some parallels because the company today, or as of year-end 23, is a much different company, a much stronger company than what Chrysler was back in 2009. Now, one thing I will point out is there is going to be some updated reporting here coming out in the next day or two for January to June of 2024 for Stellantis. So once that is released here in the next day or two, that will give us a little bit more updated information. However, we already kind of have an indicator of what that information is going to look like based off of the sales figures they released in the beginning of July. It's not going to look good. It's going to look worse than 2023. However, it's still not going to look as bad as 2009. Back in 2009, Chrysler had more liabilities, which essentially means more debt or more things that they owed other banks or people than they had assets. So that means if the company was to sell all of its assets, all of its manufacturing facilities, all of its parts, all of its inventory, it still wouldn't have enough money to pay off all of the people that it owed money to. That is a bad situation, and that meant that the company had negative equity. That meant that the people who owned this company were essentially in the negative. At the same time, when you look at the current assets and the current liabilities of the company back in 2009, again, it was inverted. Their current liabilities, which means obligations that they owe somebody within the next year, were higher than their current assets, which means money that they were expecting to come in within a year. So the company was in a very bad financial situation, and for that reason, they essentially relied on debt to be able to carry them through the financial crisis, and the government definitely stepped in and helped them out with that. If you fast forward to the year-end 2023, it's a completely different situation. The company has positive equity, it has more assets than it has liabilities. It's also sitting on about $50 billion in strictly cash. They also have line of credits available and other ways to get cash if they need it, but they're sitting on $50 billion. So that $500 or so million settlement with the US government on the emissions issues really seems like a drop in the bucket when you look at how much cash they're sitting on. Whereas back in 2009, they were sitting on about $7.3 billion in cash, which again wasn't enough to really support any of their liabilities. So it's a much different picture today than it is back then. Also, back in 2009, they had net losses, which meant their expenses exceeded their revenue figures. As of 2023, the company is net profitable. There's not any net losses. So at the end of the day, anybody who compares Stellantis today to Chrysler back in 2009 is highly mistaken. Stellantis is absolutely not going bankrupt anytime soon. I've even had people ask me this question in some comments. You know, they're concerned about buying a Stellantis product because what if the company doesn't exist? And the truth is, there would have to either be really false financial reporting or a huge cataclysmic event that for some reason would tank their sales overnight that could potentially cause a bankruptcy. Other than that, there's really, in my opinion, no concern and no fears of Stellantis filing for bankruptcy anytime soon. Now, that being said, it's not all roses for Stellantis. They're definitely facing some issues. I wouldn't say necessarily financial issues, but I think there's a product issue. And they even discussed this in their 2023 reporting. I don't think they're releasing the right products to the people that are buying them. I think they are trying to focus a little bit more on the upscale market, as you can see with their average transaction prices being about $10,000 more than the average price of a new car today. And I think that's probably hurting them a little bit because they've always been known to be more of a value brand rather than an upscale luxury brand. As of the latest inventory reporting at the end of May 2023, Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge products are sitting up there as the oldest days of inventory on dealership lots among any brand in the United States. In fact, Ram, Alfa Romeo, and Fiat had double the inventory of the average US vehicle. The national average for the days of supply of a vehicle is about 74 days. However, if you look at Jeep, they're sitting at more than double that at 147 days. That means their vehicles are essentially just sitting on the lot waiting for somebody to buy them because they have way more inventory or way more supply than they have demand for their products. And third from the bottom is Dodge at 121 days of supply. So it's definitely not an optimistic future for Stellantis, and that's not my intent for this video. I'm simply saying that they are not filing for bankruptcy anytime soon, but they do have to make some big changes. Now, I think part of the explanation for the poor sales figures up through June of 2024 and the reason that inventory is piling up is twofold. One, a lot of the vehicles under Stellantis' brands here in North America are getting pretty dated. I mean, aside from the Grand Cherokee and the Wagoneer, all of their other models like the Renegade, the Compass, we're talking the Challengers and Chargers, the Durangos, those are all pretty old models, especially in today's highly competitive market where there's new vehicles coming out almost every day with the latest technology, the latest safety features. Stellantis is a little bit behind. At the same time, not sure whether it's because of lack of funding or because of poor management, Stellantis has chosen to kill off some of their older models. I'm talking Charger, Challenger, Chrysler 300, and eliminate them from dealership lots prior to the new generations coming online. I mean, if you think about it, the Challenger and Charger were killed off or stopped in manufacturing as of December 31st, 2023. And here we are in July of 2024, and there's not a single Dodge Charger EV rolling around town. I mean, I don't even know if they've officially started production for that vehicle. And that's a little bit contrast to some other companies like Ford and GM, where they'll continue producing the prior generation up until the new generation starts hitting inventory lots. Sometimes they sell them side by side with just a little bit of a discount. But for some reason, Stellantis hasn't chosen to do this. And at the same time, the inventory that is on dealership lots is getting pretty dated. And Stellantis really isn't cutting costs as quickly as they should to offload that inventory. That being said, there are some big plans for 2025. They've already announced the Wagoneer S, which is their electric kind of sporty SUV. They're supposed to be releasing upwards of 5 new Jeep models coming out over the next year or two. One of them being the Jeep Recon, which is kind of an electrified version of the Wrangler. Chrysler also has a planned crossover coming online, which would finally grow the minuscule fleet that they have under their brand, being the Chrysler Pacifica and the Pacifica plug-in hybrid. There's really no other vehicle under Chrysler's brand right now. Dodge has the Charger EV, and I'm sure there's going to be some other crossovers coming online. So they're definitely going to be growing their inventory. They're definitely going to be expanding, and with that, your sales figures are likely going to increase, because when you look at what they're selling in 2024, they've gotten rid of almost half of the vehicles they sold back in 2023. So that's really the true reason why their sales figures are down. They just have fewer models that they're selling, and the ones they're selling aren't necessarily the right trim levels that people are wanting to buy. Now, I've also seen people talking about Stellantis potentially exiting the United States or killing off some brands, and I could see Stellantis potentially killing off some of the smaller brands if they're not able to succeed with this new next generation model. So if Chrysler's new crossover that's expected to come out next year is a flop, I could potentially see them killing off Chrysler by 2030. Same with Dodge. You know, if they're only introducing these Charger EVs and they're not selling, maybe they could cut their losses and get rid of that brand. But I do not see Stellantis ever exiting the United States. And the main reason is because it makes up a huge chunk of their revenue and their profitability. As of year-end 23, the North America market, which includes those brands that we all know, made up about 46% or so of their total sales. That's massive. That's more than the European market makes up for the entire company. Also, in terms of operating income or profitability, North America makes up nearly 59% of the entire company. So even though by volume they sell more cars in Europe than they do in the United States, they're not only making more sales in the US because the average transaction price is higher for US vehicles, but they're also making more money at the bottom line because the vehicles are more profitable here than they are in Europe. So the company would be stupid to even consider exiting the US or killing off major brands like Jeep and Ram, even though the sales are currently down, because that would mean the company would essentially be cut in half. So overall, Stellantis is not going bankrupt. However, they are going through a transitionary period, which I think they're executing a little worse than the competition. But because of that, this interim period between the old models and the new models, the company is taking a bit of a hit. Their sales are down, their profitability is going to be down, but they are not by any means going bankrupt. Don't let all of the headlines, potentially my title and thumbnail for this video, scare you into buying a Stellantis product. They're not going anywhere. Even if they decide to kill off one or two of the brands, they're not exiting the United States, which means if you still have a Chrysler product and they've gotten rid of Chrysler as a brand, you can still go to a Jeep dealership and get it serviced. So there's no worry about potential issues with servicing or resale value, because Saturn owners and Saab owners continue to own their cars despite General Motors killing off those brands back in 2008 and 2009, and they were simply just going to the same GM dealerships to get serviced. It's essentially the same vehicle underneath, it just has a different body on top. Now, the last point I want to make is now is possibly one of the best times to buy a Stellantis product. Because of everything that I mentioned in today's video, with their sales figures declining, the average prices being higher than the competition, dealerships complaining to Stellantis to make some changes, the company and the dealerships are heavily incentivizing their vehicles to move them off of the dealership lots. So not only are there national offers right now as of July 2024 where you can get upwards of $200 to $400 to $7,500 off of a Ram, Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler product, but the dealerships themselves are discounting the inventory they have on their lots. So you could potentially get over $10,000 in savings depending on which model you're buying. And I have evidence of this. I did a quick search of local dealerships here I have in Utah, and one dealership I found is selling a Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk, which is MSRP'd at about $71,000. They're selling it for $49,000. That's a discount of about 22 grand off of the MSRP when you include all of the incentives, the dealer discounts, and all of the promotions they have for the month of July. I also found a $68,000 Ram Rebel selling for $54,000. I think now may be a fantastic time to buy a 2024 Ram because the 2025 model year is about to come out, possibly already hitting dealership lots, and so they're going to want to do their best to get rid of the 2024 model year vehicles. Lastly, I saw a Jeep Wrangler Rubicon that was selling for about $5,000 off the MSRP, so you could possibly pick up a Wrangler Rubicon for the low $50,000 range, which is a very attractive price for an extremely capable off-road Jeep Wrangler where you can take the doors and the roof off. So if you've finally been convinced that Stellantis is not going bankrupt and you're interested in buying a new Stellantis product, now is a fantastic time. You have so much negotiating power given the fact that their inventory is sitting at record highs. I am certain a dealership is going to be more than happy to work with you, because even if they're stubborn and they want to make as much money as possible, they would rather have a sale than have a vehicle just sitting on their lot that they're paying interest for. So hopefully you guys found this video interesting, entertaining, informative. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Everything from discussions like this to car reviews to videos about the vehicles I own. And if you guys are interested in checking out more short form content, check out my social media, my TikTok, my Instagram at Shwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Shwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.